Welcome to the Symposium, Culture is People, Storytelling into the Future. World Artist Experience's vision is to bridge people and culture to build mutual understanding, thus hopefully respect, trust, and peace in our world. Please, as a technical detail we'd like to remind you of this evening, please place your questions in the Q&A box. So please, we encourage you to ask questions this evening. In the past sessions, we heard the importance of storytelling and the arts in building culture and challenging our culture. We were inspired to listen to other stories and tell our own story. We heard stories of culture in the land, the importance of the artists keeping their culture alive in their lands. They shared how fragmented lives can come together, how stories bring deeper understanding and even peace in the world, how we must all work together. Tonight's session will explore cultural heritage into the future. We're honored to have the artists who will tell us their stories from many various backgrounds as we look into the future. Our moderator this evening has wide experiences in the field of both the arts and education. Ms. B. Fuller knows well the importance of telling stories, but also listening carefully to others. Her background is rich. A principal, a teacher, a coach of educators, an artist, an educational consultant, and a producer for projects of global understanding. Thank you, Ms. Fuller, for moderating tonight's session.
Thank you, Betty, for your kind introduction. I'm indeed honored to be part of World Artist Experiences and to moderate this symposium this evening. As Betty said, as a lifelong secondary educator, I know that the arts are an essential component of developing and maintaining a sense of self, and as we relate to others, to the land, our past and our futures. As you've heard, tonight we will explore the through lines connecting previous lived experiences to potential new experiences. We will explore how stories built on the past and the present help us to imagine an idealized future. We're excited for all of you to join us as we're going to hear our three artists share wide-ranging stories. Tonight, we're fortunate to welcome three speakers, Helen Zugabe, Carolina Mayorga, and Sarah Hoover. Each speaker will share her thoughts on our topic this evening, and then at the end, we'll have time for some conversations after our final speaker. As Betty instructed, please go ahead and post questions in the Q&A as they occur to you, and I'll share them with the whole group at the end of the presentations. If you have a specific question for one of our panelists, please indicate that as well. This evening, our first artist is Helen Zugabe, born in Beirut, Lebanon, and she lived mostly in the Middle East and Europe before studying art and earning her BFA from the College of Visual and Performing Arts at Syracuse University. Helen currently lives and works in Washington, D.C., paints primarily in gouache and ink on board and canvas, and also works with wood, shoes, and cloth in mixed media installations. Her work has been widely exhibited in galleries and museums in the United States, Europe, and Lebanon, and her paintings are included in many private and public collections, including the White House, the World Bank, the Library of Congress, the Consulate General, Vancouver, Canada, American Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, the Arab American National Museum in Detroit, and the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Her work has been included in Art and Embassy State Department exhibitions abroad in Nicaragua, Mauritius, Iraq, Belgium, Lebanon, and Saudi Arabia. She has served as the cultural envoy to Palestine, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia. Other honors include receiving the DC Commission on Arts and Humanities Fellowship Award from 2015 to 2020, This year, the John F. Kennedy Center Reach in Washington, D.C. has selected her for the 2021 inaugural social practice residency. We are thrilled to have Ms. Gabe with us this evening.
Thank you very, very much to the organization World Artists. It's such an honor to be here. Thank you, Betty. Thank you, Bea. Thank you, Patrick, for your magician technical skills behind the scenes, and to my very esteemed panelists, one of who I work with. I'm very familiar with her work here in DC, where I'm talking to you from. And I thank the audience for joining us tonight and listening to our stories. And ultimately, as Betty said, it just comes down to that, just to listen to someone else's story. I intertwine my own with my the work that I do. And I will get right to it here. I will start sharing my screen. I will just tell you a little bit about my background. I was born in Beirut, Lebanon. My father is from Damascus, Syria, and my mother is American. And when I was 16, I was living in Beirut, Lebanon, and the Civil War began. This was in late 75. Initially, there was a bomb here, an assassination there, shootouts here and there, and they were just referred to as the Troubles. And ultimately, it turned into a full-fledged war that lasted about 15 years. So we were locked in our flat in Beirut and not permitted to go to school. There was a curfew. Ultimately, we ended up sleeping on the floor, not permitted to go to the windows. And this was weeks and weeks on end until finally the concierge of the building came to my father. And he said that two different militias are going to be are going to have a shootout. And where we lived was right on the second floor, was going to be we were going to be caught in the crossfire. So Daddy took the decision to leave our flat, leave everything, and run to the car, go out of our building, run to the car and go up to the Corniche to a safer spot. And then my mother and my sisters and I took one of the last flights out of Lebanon, leaving my father there at the time. And when we left, I asked him when we were coming back, and he said we would be back in 1 week. So that week turned for me about 35 years later. I went back. We were evacuated to Greece. And of course, it was very traumatic. We were without my father. We entered the school there. The kids in school teased us. It was because every time like a loud noise happened, we would duck under our desks. We would just hit the floor, pretty shell-shocked from what we had been through. And so it was pretty uncomfortable being in that school. I ended up having a couple of friends after sharing stories and them identifying with me in some way. One was an Italian boy who ultimately left the school, went back to Italy to his family's farm, and he wrote me a postcard saying he named a cow after me. I'm not sure that that was a compliment, but in his way it was. And another fellow from Japan gave me his school pin, and he told me this. He said, if you're lonely, look up in the sky and look up at the moon and know that I'm under the same moon as you. I mean, the shared humanity by the moon. So then I ended up in Paris, where I finished my school. And initially, I was too traumatized to walk around the block where we lived. And I was studying art history in my class. And I started learning about all these incredible painters, which I hadn't known about, and found that there was the Jeu de Paume, not too far from where we lived. And I was determined to find my way there and discover Manet, who helped me with my trauma, I guess. I ended up going there several times a week. I learned to walk around and explore, and I would go take solace in his paintings, the sun coming through the water, the River Thames, when he did a stay in London. And it was then that I decided I'm going to study art. I want to become an artist and try and talk about things that were important to me and try and express them in some way visually. That was what I was compelled to. So I studied art at Syracuse University, and then I came to Washington, and that's why I have these images here. They are my versions of the George Washington Monument and the Capitol. Of course, they look nothing like that if you've been here, but having never seen them in true life, when I first came here, I was so shocked that they were white. And I decided that I was going to put my background and the diversity of all these different people that came to this country to try and make this country their country, to where they came to seek shelter and safety. And I felt that too. I felt that too. So I did a series of the monuments, and you can go to the next slide, Patrick, please. Of course, I'm jumping, trying to keep in time for our other wonderful panelists that you'll want to hear. So here in Washington, 9/11 came. And it was a traumatic event, as you all know. Living here in Washington, we had our extra trauma with the Pentagon, and it was a horrible, horrible time. It was even double horror for somebody like me, an Arab American, where I felt a double pain. And that first week after 9/11, I was spit on. I was asked in not very nice ways over and over where I was really from. And then a longtime photographer shop that I went to, friends I thought that developed my work, that knew my work, said to me that all of Middle East and it's all people should be washed into the sea. I was pretty stunned by that. So I decided, my father's phone was tapped, and the reason we found out was because all our family and friends calling from Syria, from Lebanon, from Jordan, to express from the Gulf, to express their condolences for this country, to make sure our family was safe, our relatives were safe. And so his phone was tapped. On this piece, you can see that I used an Islamic sort of shape, the prayer rug, that you would take your shoes off if you notice them in the bottom right-hand corner. You see my stylized version of a flag. And here, what I'm asking is entry into this space of introspection, not divisiveness. Ultimately, what I wanted was the Westerners and the non-Westerners to come and enter a place of introspection and not divisiveness. So I decided all the anti-Arab American, Muslim, stereotyping, generalization, I was not going to say where I was from. I was going to pretend I was Italian, Greek, Spanish, something else. Until I had a Lebanese friend, a journalist friend, come over, and we were having some coffee here. We're talking, of course, about 9/11. It was in the first few weeks. And I told her my plan, because I was sick of being, taken as somebody who wasn't, a good person. I had nefarious, intentions and so on. And she told me, now is exactly the time to say who you are. Now is exactly the time to tell your story. Now is when people need to hear your story. And ultimately, I realized she was right, but not initially. It coincided with my mom. I think we can go to the next slide, Patrick. We entered into Iraq. This was my answer to that our entry into Iraq, our war in Iraq. There were plenty of protests here, and I marched in all of them, kind of to no avail. And so I did this piece, Prayers for Peace, my reaction to the war. Okay, we can go to the next one. So one night after dinner, my mom said, we should record your father telling his stories. And my father was born in Damascus, Syria, under the French mandate. And he was there in Lebanon until he finally immigrated to America in 1946. He was about 18 years old. And, you know, in the Arab world, and we're talking about storytelling, in the Arab world, the word for a storyteller is hakawati. And usually it is an elder of the village, the patriarch of a family, in which my family is the patriarch of our family and our extended family. He now is the patriarch. And his job as a hakawati, or the patriarch, is to further our education, all orally, nothing written down. He tells morals, he tells about our family, the community, the village life, the traditions that our families belong to in Syria and Lebanon. So at dinner, for entertain a friend, he kept this series of stories, you know, going on. And so one night my mom said, I think we should record your father. Well, as it turned out, after 9/11, it was an end, but it was also a beginning. And the beginning, as far as I was concerned, was that people in America were starting to be curious about who the Arabs were. Why would they ever do this? Why would they want to, you know, bomb us and destroy our buildings and so on? And so a gallerist contacted me and wanted me to do a solo show. And I suggested this idea that I might paint my father's stories. And she loved it. Of course, I asked my father, he refused. And he said nobody would be interested. This is oral tradition. He refused to write them down. My mom intervened, and finally he wrote them down for me, about 14 initially. And this is me. As Bea said, I use primarily gouache. This is Daddy and me. I always have some cat beside me. That's Poo-Poo Head, the kitty. And Daddy is telling me yet another story. And there are 24 of these, I think. Now we have a book. I won't go through them now, but we can move through a few of them and you can get an idea. So these are his stories from Damascus, ultimately ending with his immigration. This is a story about planting olive trees. And basically, because olive trees grow, it takes so long for them to develop their fruit, years and years. The moral of this story that my Jiddu, grandfather, told my dad when they were planting is that our ancestors planted for us to eat. Now we plant for the descendants to eat. So it's this moral that he was teaching us. Okay. This is another sort of blind charity, meaning you do good, you and the karma around will come back and reward you. It's a rich governess. She throws a basket every day into the sea with provisions of water and sustenance and a little saying from the Quran. In the event that some stranded person can find it and wash to the shore and survive on what was in the basket, ultimately, she herself finds herself washed up on the shore and taken pity on, invited into the wealthy home as a servant. Ultimately, they find out that the basket that the wealthy woman had was her basket, and she ends up becoming part of the family. Okay. This is the Sanduq, or the showbox, like the forerunner of a little a movie. So in the village square, the peddler would come and he would have a scroll. So you see he's scrolling and he would chant the story of, you know, Abla and Antar, a folk tale that's very famous in the Arab world. And the kids would sit on the little bench that he had wrapped around him. They would get a little change from their mother and come and take a seat at the little window that was open as he scrolled and chanted the story. And kids' daddy said that they didn't have any money. The kids would get up and let that child come and sit and take the seat of the child who had paid for that. And then he would move on to the next village, calling about what he was going to be showing the children. Okay. This is one that I wanted to share with you. This is a tradition of getting married in a village in Lebanon and Syria, where the bride would be brought to her mother-in-law's on a horse and followed by what's called a zeffi. And this is a band usually of musicians and debki dancers, the traditional dance that we have in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan, Palestine. And she is taken by her groom to his mother's house, her mother-in-law, who I made her look kind of evil in the back there. And what the tradition is, the mother will take a pomegranate and ask the bride to stomp on the pomegranate, which is spilling the seeds all around, with indicating her fertility and having blessing the house with many children. Also, the two mothers would conspire and they create a dough called khamire, which is a very sticky dough. And I assure you, they make it very, very sticky. And they put it on the archway of the door as the bride enters through the door. And the idea is if the dough falls, means the marriage will not last. And so I said, it's stuck probably forever, just to ensure the marriage will last. Okay. And everyone is invited to the wedding. Doesn't matter, the whole village. They just come, and usually it's a time where they share all the food. It doesn't matter. Everyone gets to eat and drink on that festive day. The tradition of having a baby is in the village. The lady who's having the baby, she remains in bed for 40 days. She has a midwife, of course, performing the duties there. The husband would never be there, though I put a husband in the corner in the right hand. He's got the fez, the tarbouche. He's smoking what we call the hubbly bubbly, or you call it shisha or hookah. His shoes are off, doing nothing. I'm kind of making a joke, but he would never be in the same room. When the baby is born, the midwife will go out and find the husband, tell him if he has the sex of the child. The husband will come back, and depending on the sex of the child, he will put coins on his wife's bed for either the boy baby or the girl baby. You can see pinned to the little baby is something that we call hijab, which means hidden. Also, it's also the head covering that women will wear, also called hijab. But in this case, it's a little amulet having either a little saying from the Quran or a saying from the Bible, and pinned on the child to protect the child. As the child grows up, the child takes it and pins it on the inside of his clothing to protect the child as he grows up. The tradition, everybody in the village will come and say mabruk, or congratulations to the lady. A special food will be made that is offered to the villagers, and they sing congratulations, zalagit, that ululating that you'll hear often in celebrations and ceremonies. When the child receives his first tooth, there's another dish that's made that has crunchy things. And this indicates the baby has his first tooth that he can crunch. And that is also offered. My father made those dishes for the births of each of his grandchildren. Okay. This is evenings in the Kroon. This is where daddy would go up with Jiddu, my grandfather, his father, into the Kroon, which is mean a vineyard in Arabic. They would go on a donkey with the provisions and a kerosene lamp. And daddy remembers that his father would go around in the vineyard and say hello to the plants and the bushes and the trees that were planted there. They would have been planted specifically for members of the family, weddings, baptisms, occasions. And so Jiddu, my grandfather, would go around and Daddy said he would greet the plants and flowers and trees like greeting his relatives and his family. There again, you know, in contrary to other one, the land is so, so important. The land is very, very important. Okay, that was for another ceremony. This is Eid el-Salib, which means Feast of the Cross. And the tradition here, this was based on Saint Helena, searching for the crucifixion used searching for the cross that was used in the crucifixion. She went on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem from Constantinople, and her father was Emperor Constantine. And so what she did was she stationed people on all the hilltops. And when she found the cross that was used in the crucifixion, they lit bonfires from one hill to the next hill to the next hill to let them know that indeed the cross had been found. And it's an annual tradition and a celebration in Lebanon and Syria, where they build bonfires and the boys steal the wood from one another and jump over it. And it's another feast day. Okay. This is Critiquing the Bride. This is a story about my teta. She's there in the blue, my grandmother, and the lady next door. This was a story that was told to me. And my Aunt Mary, one of my father's sisters, is in the tree, the mulberry tree. She's sitting there in the tree. And she was about 11 years old. And that lady decided that she would be a suitable bride for her son. Of course, Aunt Mary got wind of that. And the tradition is that the woman will come over and the intended bride-to-be will offer sweets and coffee and not say one word, but she will just show herself as a nice, dutiful girl. And she will be looked over as a potential bride for the woman's son. Well, of course, Teta was just being polite. She would never have her child be married at age 11, though it happens, but it didn't happen in my father's family. And so Aunt Mary certainly heard. So she ran and hid in the mulberry tree. And then ultimately she hid in the big pot, a big vat of flour that they kept from year to year so nobody would find her. Finally, the woman, the neighbor, left. She was very affronted by the not showing of the potential bride. Teta calls Aunt Mary. She finally comes out completely covered in flour. And I think she got in trouble a little bit, but she mostly ate the sweets and they drank the coffee, and it became sort of something that was told in the family. And she ended up becoming the Dean of Women at Colorado, actually, when she immigrated to America on the ship with Daddy. Okay, we're nearing the end of this little series. I want to be aware of the time. This is saying goodbye when the ship, they received passage to come to America. And a small ship, all the villagers come to say goodbye. There's Teta in the middle, my father, my Aunt Mary. The woman in the forefront of the painting with the scarf on is waving goodbye. That's actually my father's sister, Aunt Selwa, and older than him, and Aunt Mary. And the American ship had a cutoff and on the age of the children. And so Aunt Selwa wasn't permitted to travel with them to go to America. So she stayed behind. She just recently died at age 102. Hi, Aunt Selwa. Hopefully she's listening. I never told my dad, actually, that that's her waving goodbye. Okay. This is the ship that they come. It's called Vulcania. It was the ship that the Americans confiscated from the Italians during World War II. And Daddy remembers this day so clearly in the story he writes. They heard that on a certain time in the morning, the early morning, that they were going to be seeing the Statue of Liberty. And no one had ever seen it. And so all the young people like Daddy, 18 years old, decided to stay up all night so they would be sure to catch the first glimpse of the Statue of Liberty, and they were from Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, that the ship had come and brought to America if they received passage. And my dad remembers, and he said it was a clear morning on that day, he remembers. Okay. I'm sorry for my picture, my image here. I didn't have a cell phone when I was in Palestine. As Bea mentioned, I was invited for a few trips abroad as a cultural envoy, and ultimately, yes, I'm sharing my work. I'm doing workshops with them. I'm teaching them about gouache and so on and so forth. But ultimately, to get back to why we're here today, it's primarily about sharing stories, them sharing with me. And of course, I already have, my empathies are already right there as an Arab American. They can already identify with me on that connection. They were from the West Bank, and we did a month workshop. And here they are. I'm showing them images they had never, this is a UNESCO school. I'm sorry, an UNRWA school, where the supplies are very, very, very limited. And I was showing them images of Picasso, and some of my work inspired. They didn't even know who was Picasso. Anyways, and we can go to the next slide, just a couple from here. Here we are. As the days went by, you can see we became a group of women sharing stories, sharing food, sharing tea, sharing sweets, sharing music, the music of Fairuz, and even dancing, and listening to stories. And we can go to the next one, seeing what the work that I was doing with the colors and the patterns. One day I turned around and one of the women was crying. And I thought, oh no, what did I do? What did I do? It turned out that her brother was in prison. Many of them had very, very sad stories under the occupation. And, you know, the first thing I did with them, tell me your story. Let's see where you're coming from. Tell me about you, your village, your school. And she said that she had been unable to use color, and she was so depressed, she only used black and white. But here, after seeing my color and my brightness and the patterns and the sort of joyfulness and a lot of the work that I was showing them, she was so overcome, and she had sort of this new outlook on her work. And here are some of the women inspired by some of my work. Okay, one more in this little series. I went to a school. This school, the children, when we entered into the school, the rule in that school was you were not permitted to talk about anything outside. No occupation, no anything negative. They came in, they studied art, they studied painting, they studied music and dancing. That was it. It was really something. This is a little school that I did a workshop in. Okay. I was also invited to a refugee center. They call it refugee center. I say refugee camp, but they say center. I also was doing workshops, primarily these people in the refugee, ranging many ages, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, Eritrea, Somalia. I said, please tell me your story. Paint me your story. As this man, he's working away in the pen. He refused to use color as well. And he comes and he shows me this. And I said, what is this? And it was the dinghy. You know, you've heard of those dinghies now, right now, it's happening on the Mediterranean Sea. There were just some rescued. These horrible, flimsy fishing boats that they pack into, smuggled onto. And somehow he made it from Libya. And here he is, he drew himself there on the right hand at the top, and he wanted to give that to me. And I said, this is your story, this is your history, you keep that, you keep that. Okay. Little kids telling me their stories. You see the sad sun, you see the bombing. It's very difficult. You know, we get better as the days go by, but it's hard. There will be some smiley suns and some SpongeBobs and some little moments of laughter. And we worked outside because it happened to be a beautiful day in Switzerland on that day. So the older kids painting me, leaving their war situations, their homes, leaving their friends. So hard. Okay. I finally get back to Lebanon. This is one of the first pieces I did called Map of Home. That was after 35 years. I go to Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. This is the Mediterranean Sea, the mountains, the map of Lebanon covering my head and my heart, my kitty, my paintbrush, my kitty Stumpy. Okay. When I come back, the quote unquote Arab Spring begins, and I'm nearing the end, you guys. Hold on, hold on. And this is the first piece I do, expressing hope and optimism and the possibility of change in the Arab world. And we go to the next slide. It doesn't end up that way. Over the past decade now, 11 years, I've been documenting the devolution of the Arab Spring. This is called Generations Lost, turning into the full-fledged war in Syria. Okay. I am taking off on Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go. I painted a series of 24 children's shoes. And I'm, you know, when they say that story, you have all your dreams ahead of you. And I am being ironic on that. And these little kids crossing borders and leaving their homes and leaving their schools and traveling in the most wretched situations to flee for safety, the places they will go. And honestly, it's a matter of luck, as we know, it's a matter of luck. Okay. I begin a series, and now I'm going to be ending with this, called Syrian Migration Series. I based this series after the great Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series, where he painted in 1940 and 1941 the movement of African Americans from the rural South to the urban North in search of a better place to live, to get away from segregation and Jim Crow laws, and everyone knows, and lynchings and the drought, on and on. And so with his short narratives, declarative narratives that were unemotional with the timeline until his 60th panel, I parallel a lot of his images. This is, if you're familiar with his work, you will recognize some of them, and some are departed from. This is the beginning of the revolution that began in Dara in Damascus. This is when the war really began in Syria, because kids spray painted, little 12-year-old kids spray painted anti-regime things on their school wall. They were taken and arrested and tortured and thrown back to their families, and the village erupted in protest and revolution. And that's when the whole war and revolutions began in Syria in March of 2011. Okay. Of course, bombing, they're fleeing. Okay. This is the siege of Halab, which is the second largest city in outside of Damascus. The regime sieged the villagers out of food, water, electricity, and they had no food. They were so hungry, and Damascus and its suburbs are very famous for their cats, their Damascene cats. They resorted actually to eating cats. Okay. Of course, disappeared. This echoes the graffiti that was used quite a bit, especially in Egypt. This means freedom, hurriya in Arabic, that I've painted. People are taken, put in underground prisons, in detentions, and tortured, and we don't even know what's happened to men. There's over 100,000 missing. Probably you would be better off dead. Okay. Of course, Jacob Lawrence's great piece, St. Louis, Chicago, New York, and you see where my movement of people, Turkey, France, Germany. I hope you all look up Jacob Lawrence's work if you get a chance at some point after our talk. Okay, I'm nearing the end. Of course, the huge backlash, 13 million Syrian refugees in 5 years, 5 years, such a short amount of time. In Europe, here, everywhere, big backlash, big demonstrations against them. Anti, thought they were taking everything from them. And you see some of the signs here. Okay. They were locked up at the borders, not permitted to cross. Okay. Here, a departure from Jacob Lawrence, but part of the series nonetheless. They are crossing the Mediterranean Sea, and you see the peril that they're in. Okay. I think some of you may remember this image. Based on the photograph, the very famous photograph of little Aylan Kurdi, who was a 3-year-old, little Syrian boy, washed up. They were in one of those boats with his father trying to flee. He was washed up on the Turkish shore with his little shoes on. And that's a Turkish soldier who finds him. And I debated, but I thought, you know, I'm not going to forget him. I'm going to keep him as part of this series. I'm telling the truth in my own way. And we're not going to forget this little boy. Okay, and I think this will be the last one here, and you're free of me. This is ongoing. This is in Idlib, which is the province between Syria and Turkey, the northern province. They're bombing, they're in camps, they're taking children away that are age 11 and putting them in other tents. It's still going on. And I have so much more to say, but I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't go too much of the time. Anyways, I will turn off and thank you for your gracious listening. I'm sorry about the glitch with my screen.
Thank you so much, Helen. I do absolutely appreciate your artistic reference to Jacob Lawrence. Well done. And thank you so much for sharing your harrowing and heartfelt stories. The way you've persevered and grown over your experiences and have dedicated your life to artistic expression, both to honor your stories and address current events, is truly, truly inspiring. Thank you. Let's all take a deep breath, and then we're ready for our next wonderful artist. Carolina Mayorga is a Colombian-born and naturalized American interdisciplinary artist who currently lives and works in Washington, D.C. Carolina has exhibited her work nationally and internationally for the last 20 years. Her work is part of national and international collections and has been reviewed in publications in South America, Europe, and the United States. Mayorga's artwork addresses issues of social and political content, comments on migration, war, identity, translate into video, performance, site-specific installations, and two-dimensional media in the form of photography and drawing. Carolina, welcome. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you guys so much. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I think I'm just gonna jump into my share screen right now. So let's see how the technology treats me tonight. Okay, so some of the themes of the panel were about immigration, cultural identity, gender identity. For me, it was so hard to pick just a few works that talk about that because my whole career is being based basically on my bicultural background. Beatrice, when you were reading my bio or whatever, that's exactly, I'm a bicultural person. I was born in Colombia and I moved to this country when I was 25 years old, and now I'm 51. So it's part of my life there and part of my life here. So I always say I'm not from there and I'm not from here, right? So my whole art career is based on that premise. Is based on my bicultural background, and so I wanted to show a couple of pieces very related to that, to my background. The first one, the one that I'm showing here in the screen, is called, like you see, Made in the USA. It's a piece that I recreated many, many times. It's a performance art piece in which I sweep. Um, One of the things that I noticed when I'm from my Latino background, and I noticed here in this country, most of us Latinos and immigrants work in the service industry. Um, so I wanted to honor, I wanted to comment on these kind of like things that we do, chores that we take, jobs that that sometimes are not very seen, right? Like you have that the janitor comes at 6 p.m., the lady that comes cleaning, yeah, you don't see her. She's not like the main character. So what I wanted to do with this piece was kind of like highlight, like kind of like showing to the American audience what we do, sometimes what we do here. So this piece is called Made in the USA. I've recreated this piece many, many times. The first one, like if you see here, was in 2012 at the former Corcoran, that gallery that is not there anymore. And I did a 7-hour performance piece, and which I was cleaning the whole time for 7 hours straight. That's actually been my longest performance piece. As you can see the images, I'm like going up and with I was changing tools. So sometimes I was sweeping, sometimes I was using the squeegee, cleaning the screen, cleaning the door, all these kind of like things that the Latino community do. So that was a comment on migration and a comment on what we do. I was taking my lunch break up in a they had a glass case there, and so I was taking my lunch there. And so that piece I recreated in Chicago, in different. I actually brought it most recently in 2018. I brought it to Canada, and I think I have some images of that. Made in Montreal, and in this case, I decided to wear tape on my mouth, kind of like you just do the cleaning without talking too much, which worked really great because I don't speak any French. And some people were asking me questions about the piece and I couldn't respond. So that actually worked out very well when they asked questions in French and I couldn't respond. So this is the piece in Montreal. This is at the World Trade Center in Montreal. That was in March of 2018. So that was one of the first pieces that I wanted to show. I've done lots of different pieces related to that. The other one that I wanted to show here was this piece. It's a recent piece. I did this year, and I think it was in May of this year. It's called Q&A interview with Carolina Mayorga. And it's one of those pieces when you really start looking at the art world itself. I've always, I was just saying, I look at the service industry and immigrant workers and all these kind of like other things that are not related to the art world. In this case, I decided to look at the issue of cultural identity through the art world, what happens in the art world. And so this piece is a funny one. I'm not gonna get you through the whole thing because it's a little longer, but it was a performance art piece when, you know, when you go to when you have a show, they have the interview with the artist, the gallery talk, the Q&A, and you also, it's always, I guess Helen shares this with me, you always ask the same question, where do you come from? I'm gonna put your piece in the best place because you know, we wanna highlight the immigrants, and sometimes you've been here in this country longer than the person that owns the gallery, things like that. So it's always that cultural identity in relationship to the art world. So this piece is really funny because there's I didn't warn the interviewer, and so I send the questions, ask me these questions, and when the person asked the questions, I wouldn't respond. I would just stay silent. And some of the questions were, you guys can look at it later. Some of the questions were all those stereotype questions that they ask you. Um, how long have you been in this country? And then I was just silent. So all of those questions that, when did you come? Where are you from? And all those questions that are become a stereotype for who you are, right? So that's something very interesting that I actually started doing most recently, after 20 something years of making art. I kind of like looked at the art world in that same manner that I had looked at all the other my surroundings before. So so that's those are the first two pieces that I wanted to show, related more to immigration and cultural identity. I've also, Helen was showing some pictures of I can show that one really quick. I'm gonna cheat and show something else. I did some piece related to, what was this, for 2014. This piece is it's called The Living Postcard, and it's when I was doing a performance piece where you sit next to me, and you would take a picture of this kind of like a stereotyped Latino lady holding the flowers. So you would, it was an interactive performance where you had to sit next to me and take a picture of yourself sitting next to the character. So I've done all these pieces about that. I've also been a waitress. I've also been the Statue of Liberty, cleaning, all sorts of different things related to my identity as not only as Latina, but also as a female, right? Like all these roles most of the times are performed by women. So that's part of my work related to immigration and cultural identity. One of the other parts of this panel was responses to the pandemic. What have you done during the pandemic? So I'm gonna show you a couple of examples that I've done with the pandemic. So in 2020, this year or last year, I'm confused now, but I created this project actually earlier this year in January. We started this project in January of 2021, and it's called Artidotes. And it was actually a project funded by the DC Commission of the Arts and Humanities. And we did this project at the John Hisaoka Healing Arts Gallery here in Washington, DC. And it was kind of, it was supposed to be a 6-month project, and it's still going, And so basically what I did was I've always had this idea of art being for everybody. Most recently, I've gotten more and more into these community-based projects, how art is not only for artists. Art doesn't have to be just in galleries. Art has to be for everyone, right? So when I got this project funded by the DC Commission and with the great support from the gallery, which is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the John Hisaoka Healing Arts Gallery. They have the Smith Center for Healing and the Arts, which they have programs for cancer patients. They have all sorts of programs for terminal patients, people that are dealing with depression, but also for all of us. I actually ended up taking a lot of yoga classes and meditation classes and all that. So they have this gallery. This is on 17th Street and 17 and U here in DC. And so I created this project called Artidotes. I invited 20 artists to participate in the project. Some of them were in the gallery. So if you see the images here, this is it's not exactly a group show. It's kind of like a different approach of a group show, because what I did was I invited the artists to respond to the premise of antidotes. What do you think is an antidote? Create your own antidote. How you can think of art as being a healing tool. So basically what the artists did, I gave them the freedom to interpret that concept in any way they wanted. Some of us, I was the first one taking over the gallery. I did this project called Las Princesas, and it's this little, I don't know, you guys can see these like little dolls on some wheels, and it was an installation. I guess there's more of those. This is my intervention. That was the first project. I did a performance in which I was playing with these little dolls and doing and coloring books, and it was an installation with the dolls, and then like it was kind of like a party. Childhood memories, all that came into the picture to create that work. And then after that, I invited each of the artists to respond to, okay, to the premise, to what I had done in the work, in the gallery. And then we have all those different artists. There's the one after me was Travis Childers, actually. He created an installation with pieces of tape and faces from the newspaper. Eloisa Escudero did a performance piece in which people would direct them to Zoom to put pieces of this was magnetic paint, and people would go and ask her, this piece should go on top of it. She had a car in outside, and it was so people would direct them to Zoom, because back then everything was mostly virtual. And then she would direct people, and then when she placed the piece on top of the card, it would create some sort of wish. You had to wish something, and then it would come true. This is Sudaika Ninza. She did these beautiful characters. Marta Stauniger, she did a meditation. Actually, some paintings that responded to my installation. Actually, she used some of my artwork in her work too. Rex de la Farcan. And then I invited a group from Colombia that did a performance and a workshop online. So it was all related to healing and arts and all that. And so that was earlier this year. And then my next project, which I'm going to show you here, it's which is kind of like still in progress, because it's called Antidotes in Color. It's the second part of this series, and which is it's work in progress. I already started. What I'm doing now is paintings. During the pandemic, I started drawing and painting. One of my colors of choice, it's always been pink, because it's kind of like the idea of saying things in pink. When something is bad, but if you say it or paint it in pink, it looks better, right? It's not as bad. So, but then I decided to start using color. So that's why this became Antidotes in Color. And this whole series is based on Fauvism. If you guys are familiar with Fauvism, it's a art movement from the beginning of the 20th century that favors colors. The word, if you know French, the word, I learned that the word fauve means wild beast. So it's like the colors were really crazy. One of the major artists in this movement is Henri Matisse. And so that inspired me to go crazy with color, to create all these like little paintings. These are all, most of them are watercolor paintings and random colors. The colors don't match at all. They don't match what they are. I just go random. And so I thought it was a way to to share with people, you know, that kind of like hope, color, also inspired by recently, I don't know if you guys, I take walks every day around town, and I've seen more murals and murals around town from local artists, very colorful. We all trying to cope with the difficulties of the situation, and I thought adding color also reminded me of the Washington Color School. So all these things created this series that is actually an ongoing series that is called Artists in Color. And one of my latest project that is gonna happen sometime soon is called it's a project in my I teach at Capitol Hill Arts Workshop. And so they commissioned me to create a project to renovate the whole facade of the building. And if you see, that's me with the roller and trying to paint the whole thing. It was a different color back then. I can show you really quick the way it was 2009. Almost. Here. So this was back in 2009. I participated with a couple of artists. The project leader, Bruce McKay, he designed this, and then I participated with adding the sculptures to the project. And then next year, the show, we call it show, Capitol Hill Arts Workshop, is gonna turn 50 years. So they said, I was always like, these sculptures look a little rusty. I want to kind of like make them a little better, etc. Long story short, they said, go crazy. And I did, because this is what's happening now. It's not finished yet. I have some images more recent. It's these letters here are acrylic. I made them. I fabricated them with acrylic. They're gonna be on top of each of the columns because it's spelled CHAW, Cho. And so it's work in progress. And so that's part of my last project, Artists in Color. You know, like people walk by Capitol Hill, and it's part of what we do. We try to build community through the art. So I thought, you know, bright colors, crazy color, make it happy would do the job for our neighborhood. Also, I teach kids there, and I teach a couple of drawing and sculpture classes for kids and adults. I've been sharing the project with them. So it's a kind of like a healing, a way of actually making art accessible to everybody, which is also a concept that I taken from Joseph Beuys when he talks about the sculpture, like but it's, I forgot the exact term. It's when you make art that is not just for artists and by artists, right? It's for everybody. Everybody can be an artist. That's what he says. So that's what when I am right now. And just to finish, speaking of these, just to wrap it up, I have here a little doll that it's supposed to be me. This is a project that I started a long time ago, making these little fabric dolls. At first, the concept was they were displaced citizens, because displacement is a huge thing in Colombia. All these people moving around. It's a never-ending story. So I created this project based on on displacement and all that. And I made a bunch of these little dolls, not exactly like this one. And so I've been doing that for a long time. Sometimes I leave it alone. Sometimes I go back to it. But then for some reason I decided to turn this project over to my aunt, who was the first one to, who actually, the one who introduced me to the art world, actually. When I was 7 years old, she taught me how to paint. She taught me how to draw. She was the one that actually made me become an artist. And so I said, she's 85 years old right now, and she still teaches me things. And during the pandemic, we started doing Zoom conversations. She still lives in Colombia, and I told her, "You want to do these things?" And she said, "I love it." But I said, take over the project. I don't want you to make whatever I wanted to do. So she decided to make, she decided that she wanted to make the family tree. And then she started with me. Apparently that's me, with my Artios shirt. And she's now with her family. She's going crazy with the project. And so I said, it makes me really happy to see how things evolve, how my project is not my project anymore, but it's somebody else. And I really feel that the need to share my artwork, not with everybody else, not just by showing it, of course, but also you take over. What do you want to do with it? That's why when B asked me, what question do you want, I'm open to whatever. I want to respond as well to whatever comes, as opposed to always, sometimes when we're visual artists, we're a little too straightforward, right? I do this, I make the sketch, and I do it. Now I'm trying to be a little more open, and I'm really trying to share what I do, what I feel, with everybody else. So that's my story. Thanks, everybody.
Carolina, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And now we fully understand and appreciate your fuchsia beret as well. Thank you for sharing your stories of your life and your artistic practices, particularly as a performance artist, as you ask us to question biases and stereotypes that we might impose on others whom we do not know well. And thanks for sharing your antidotes for healing during the pandemic, all very thought-provoking. Now we're going to turn our attention to our third and final speaker, Sarah Hoover, who is Associate Dean for Innovation, Interdisciplinary Partnerships, and Community Initiatives at the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins University. Named one of Musical America's 30 music professionals of 2019 for her work linking music and medicine at Johns Hopkins, Hoover leads a variety of interconnected efforts across the university and hospital system to conduct research, develop therapies, bring music into clinical settings, and provide multidisciplinary clinical care for musicians. She has shepherded the development of concert series and bedside music programs at Hopkins Hospital, as well as programs in creative aging and sensory-friendly performances. Her book, Music as Care, Artistry in the Hospital Environment, was published this year. Prior to her appointment at Peabody, she had a career as a performer, teacher of singing, and music journalist. Her writing has been published by the Washington Post, Baltimore Sun, and others. From 2012 to 2015, she founded and directed the Oyster Bay Music Festival in Oyster Bay, New York. She's a graduate of Yale University and earned a Doctor of Musical Arts in Vocal Performance from Peabody. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now. She's going to bring a wonderful perspective that we have not heard yet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bea, and thank you, Helen and Carolina, for your words. I'm actually going to pick up, I'm going to start with something that Helen began, and I'm going to end with something that Carolina also spoke about. So hopefully these themes will weave together. I'm going to share my screen, and I hope that we can get going here. So the first thing I want to share with you is that I'm not a visual artist. I just want to make that very, very clear. And you'll see that, in fact, this is one of my early works in second grade. And I put this here because I wanted to say a little bit about my own story. I grew up in Washington, D.C., the daughter of a curator of musical instruments at the Smithsonian. I grew up around extremely unusual and interesting instruments and the people who played them. And while Helen talked about the stories my father told me I was just surrounded in my early childhood by the songs my mother taught me. And those songs were very formative to me and really helped drive my passion to pursue a career as a singer of opera, oratorio, chamber music, a classical music singer. And that I did for a little under 20 years. I also became a teacher of singing. I became very interested in the mechanics of the body in making music and different issues that came to become to tie up singers, and really interested in helping them open up their bodies, release their voices. Very important work for me. And part of why that was important was because I actually was experiencing as yet undiagnosed minor neurological condition that affected my larynx, which in 2011, when I was finally diagnosed, began the process towards leaving singing and moving to another field. And in 2015, I started the job that I currently have at the Peabody Institute, which was a wonderful and terrifying and grief-filled time as I ran away from the world that I'd known as a singer and teacher of singing into the unknown, not only in a job that had no roadmap as the first Associate Dean for Innovation, Interdisciplinary Partnerships, and Community Initiatives, but also having to really rework and rethink my own identity as an artist and as a human being. My work in my day job at Peabody was really to help train and offer a mindset to help develop new kinds of artists at the nation's oldest conservatory. Citizen artists who understood their work to be mission-driven, entrepreneurs who could take advantage of new opportunities, communicators who really knew how to connect with audiences, not just through their playing, but through their words and their actions. Expanders of what has been a very, very precious but somewhat fossilized canon that's been handed down to classical music through the classical music tradition. Digital natives who know how to really expand their work through technology into new audiences and places. Folks who are ready and able to adapt to new circumstances, new contexts. This has traditionally not been what classical musicians have been best known for. And really artists who understand that they need to go out and advocate for their art form in the world in order to help this precious heritage, these songs and stories that have been handed down from Beethoven to Beethoven's student, to the student, to the student, to the teacher, to our students, to understand that in order to make that old new again, they have to go out and share that work broadly. And there are a lot of big questions that 21st century artists need to be asking. I think you heard this in both things that Helen and Carolina said. Who is art for? Who gets to make art, and for what purposes? And how can the high arts become more relevant, more inclusive, more accessible, more responsive? How can we break down the barriers between artists and audiences to create more connection? So paradoxically, my explorations in really grappling with those big questions in my role and working with students and faculty took me all kinds of places, not only the music festival that I founded on Long Island, but most unexpectedly to the hospital. And in the hospital, I've alighted in the hospital, and I have spent quite a bit of time helping musicians find their way in this context and bringing this music into an environment where it can release its healing potential, which many of our musicians, our students, don't fully recognize the healing potential of music. And my inquiry, my research, and my deepening practice in this work led me to write the book that Bea mentioned at the beginning, that was published in May of this past year, and really traces the journey of the conservatory trained artist from the sort of conservatory land and mindset where excellence, artistry, and skill mean certain things, and very, very, very narrow things, redefining, expanding, opening out, making more inclusive those notions in order to be prepared to leave that environment and go into the environment of healthcare instead, leave the concert hall behind. And then once in the hospital, look and see, what are musicians doing there? What do they do? What kind of practices do they have? And how that work has been professionalized and is increasingly professionalized. And how partnerships between musicians and folks from other disciplines arise and develop and deepen and mature and come to fruition. And then in between those four body chapters of the book, I've included artists' perspectives from multiple different contexts. All of this work falls not in the domain of music therapy, but adjacent to it in a rising new field called the field of arts and health. And the field of arts and health was sort of formally defined in a white paper published in September 2017 by the National Organization for the Arts and Health, and defined as the field that uses the power of the arts to enhance health and well-being, not only in clinical, but also in community contexts. And we know quite a bit through the research, not only in arts and health practitioners, but also in music therapists, that music brings many, many benefits to learning and to cognition, to mood, to social interaction, and to motivation. Many of these benefits are directly recruited in interventions, therapeutic interventions delivered by healthcare professionals and music therapists, but also delivered in artistic interventions by artists, arts and health practitioners. Music's benefits in healthcare are also well recognized in the research body to date. It helps reduce costs through shortening stays, fewer complications, reduce need for pain medication, promotes healing through reducing stress, increasing motivation, improving mood. It's been demonstrated to improve patient experience and satisfaction, and it can increase workplace satisfaction through retention and elevating morale. All of this it really indicates that music can be recruited much more robustly as a low-cost, low side effect intervention. And I'd like to point out that while we now do know that there's quite a bit of evidence for why music's impact in healthcare itself has been significant, it's important to return to an old definition that the World Health Organization coined in 1948, that health is not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, but it is in fact a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So this really begs the question, if music has it's more, the benefits of music and of the arts in general can be recruited much more systematically, much more rigorously, and much more broadly, not only in healthcare situations, but in public health conditions, in addressing collective trauma, in responding to racism, in responding to social exclusion and isolation, in responding to mental health concerns, and in response to living with chronic disease. And so this is a beautiful infographic from the University of Florida Center for the Arts and Medicine website a white paper called Creating Communities Through Healthy Communities Through Cross-Sector Collaboration. So much possibility, so much so that in my own thinking about the value of the arts outside of the concert hall, specifically music, I've really rethought my whole parameters. What I think a lot of us have called community engagement or community arts actually falls more broadly, more squarely, and perhaps more appropriately within a larger umbrella of understanding that the arts impact on community health and on population health, on public health in the biggest picture. And all of that, the potential for creating health comes back to telling stories, sharing stories, and having, in this case, music serve as the bridge and the vehicle for the stories that are told and shared. Performers often understand their own work as rendering the composer's story as faithfully and beautifully as possible. But in fact, the music itself can serve as the beginning of a story between two people who can share their lives as through the vehicle of the music. And really picking up on something that Carolina spoke about, that the artist is the art belongs to everyone. The artist helps to foster co-creation, right? The artist is a facilitator as well as a bridge builder and connector. The connection between the old and the new, providing a way into the art and a way out from the concert hall and out into the community more broadly, into every corner where it is appropriate. Creating access, inclusion, and new audiences. Really building relevance and personally meaningful experiences with the music, whatever music it might be. And really thinking about music making as not a performance, but a partnership, a co-creation, and as an act of service to others. And I just want to remind you that while Carolina was making antidotes during the pandemic, musicians in so many ways were silenced. This is a stunning photograph from the concert hall in Barcelona, the Opera House in Barcelona, where a string quartet there at the very bottom played for an audience of plants because the concert halls were, of course, closed. Each one of those plants went to a healthcare worker as a way of really honoring the work that first line responders are doing. But it's been a long, tough road for musicians, and mental health issues have really proliferated, not only because of the pandemic, but all of the other social movements, the anti-racism, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, all of the other issues, that social justice issues that have arisen during this time. And so in order to really help create support for potential new careers that artists could have as teaching artists, as artists in residence, arts and health practitioners, or artists in healthcare. We need new courses of academic study and training. We need pathways to certification, some of which are coming online soon. We need pathways to current jobs that exist in different healthcare environments, public health conditions. Wouldn't it be great if we could get social prescribing to take hold in this country so that there would be even more jobs for artists? And we need our artists to be able to go out there and create new jobs for themselves, where they understand the value of what they have to bring to our communities, not just in a very through the beauty of what they play or sing, but through something even more profound, understanding and reconnecting with a very ancient function of the arts, which is a source of healing, a source of telling and sharing stories within communities. And in light of how challenging the work of artists is, and in light of how valuable it is that we support the artists in our communities, this is a model I've just discovered, which is a mental health recovery model, which is actually a model of mutual recovery, a relational construct that offers new opportunities to build egalitarian, appreciative, and substantially connected communities, resilient communities of mutual hope, compassion, and solidarity. And this is where I think that this work can go, where artists can forge ahead and keep being those vehicles of healing and recovery, but in fact, in so doing, restore and recover themselves, build up a sense of self-worth and identity in a more profound and impactful way. So I'm going to stop there and say thank you so much for your time and for listening and staying with us in this event this evening. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much for your presentation, for helping us see some of the scientific proof of the true deep impact of art in healing practices. And while I'm sure that transition was difficult for you, a talented and successful singer and musician, your shift and your sharing your impressive intellect and talents in a new way is truly improving the world in such an important way. And also thank you for linking our artists and our conversations today as we all seek to use the arts for healing, bridge building, and inclusion. And I would say inclusion is a vital need for all humans. We all want a sense of belonging and a voice, and we want to be heard. And I also would postulate that we all have creative spirits that should be nurtured, and we should nurture in each other. I'd like to invite all three of our panelists, Sarah, leave your mic on, and Helen and Caroline, if you could turn your mics and cameras back on. We'll just take a few moments to answer questions. And thank you all three for sharing your stories and your practices with us tonight. Clearly, we've heard just a small portion of the great work that you all three are undertaking, and I am truly inspired. So one question that has come through is if you could briefly share just a little soundbite of the healing that you've experienced through telling your stories, through your art and contribution to the arts now or during the pandemic in particular. And let's start with Helen. Let's go right through Helen, Carolina, and then Sarah, if you would.
Okay. Well, for me, I actually, in a lot of ways, I had time to sit here and paint and think and absorb and try to keep in mind that I don't know if burden is the right way, but my responsibility, let's put it this way, as an artist, is to keep telling stories of people who cannot, at this point, tell their own. And so to keep being, it sounds a bit trite, but a voice through my art for the voiceless. And by extension, yes, my background is from the Arab world, and I'm talking about the migration and the displacement and so on of the Syrians, but it's all the same. When we talk about Afghanistan, when we talk about Haiti, when we talk about Central America, as Carolina so beautifully did in her, as we're talking about people in the hospitals, we are all the same darn person, there's a little differences here and there. Some are darker, some are lighter. And as far as I'm concerned, the difference between, if you want to say us and them, is luck. L-U-C-K, luck. Well, where we happen to be born, where our children are born, what opportunities, what schools. I love that, Carolina. I'm going to go and just say, Carolina, the people that you're talking about are the people I'm also talking about as well. People who are not heard and seen but not heard. And the tape expressing the voiceless. And I don't know. I just really think it's our responsibility as artists to keep it in the front and center of people's minds and keep that dialogue open and keep sharing and keep hearing one another's stories and keep listening. As one of your former, Sarah, I loved your presentation too. It was brilliant. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. Carolina, would you like to add your perspective?
Yeah, I just want to say, adding to what Helen was saying, one of the things that happened during the pandemic, I did the same as you did, Helen. I turned into my art. I started, I think I made like 1,500 pieces of art.
Oh my
During
gosh.
like a year and a half. Not all of them are good. Most
Yeah.
of it's crap.
Yeah.
Crap. But it was a way for me to cope with the difficulties of the situation. How can I express what I'm feeling here? So sometimes, I would wake up at 3 in the morning, grab a pen, a pencil, and paint and draw and go crazy.
I know.
After a second, when I returned to some sort of sanity, I decided I need to share this. I need to share this with everybody. And one of my outlets, I teach. I'm a teaching. Sarah was talking about teaching artists. That's what I do at Cho. And then I felt the responsibility that Helen talked about. I was like, I have to deliver for my students. So it was one of my first. I've been teaching for, I don't know, 18, 20 years, and I had never taught virtually. So that was quite a challenge. But I said, how can I make it happen for I have students from 5-year-olds to adults. So I have to make it happen for these people. So we became very resourceful. I asked them, no, we're not gonna buy materials. We're not gonna go shopping because we can't. We're not gonna. So what paper do you have at home? This or that, and some of them. Sometimes the spouses that have never taken a class before, the other kid that doesn't want to go in camera, they were like, yeah, let's all join in. So it became more like a flowing experience, and it was it was gratifying for them, but I also found it very gratifying for me because I felt like, okay, we're all coming here together, we're doing something for each other. Yes, I'm your teacher, but it's not like we're all trying to figure it out here. So it was a very great experience in terms of how we are able as humans, and I guess Sarah can talk about more about this, how we don't give up, we're resilient. At some point, the world is gonna, it's not gonna end, so grab get up and do it.
You get up every morning, keep going, because that's where the hope is.
Exactly. So that was one of the we're still struggling. I go to work with the mask on. The kids, keep your mask on. Keep your distance and all that. So we're doing it, and I think we all learn from this so much that we can. We're resilient. We can do it, and nothing is gonna happen to us. We're here, and we're gonna get through all of it at some point. Some people didn't. I had some family members that passed during COVID and all that. But what are we gonna do? We're gonna honor them in the best way we can, and just try to look to the future. Look to the future.
I think, you know, it's interesting hearing you both talk about your experience as visual artists, because it sounds like you both were prolific. Might not have been great, but prolific. And, you know, for the musicians and especially the singers and wind players, they were silenced because of course, you
Yeah.
know, the super spreading event in the state of Washington, right from the very beginning of the pandemic, the choir. So just really, really challenging to not be able to be on stage, not be able to sing in communal settings. Very, very hard. I think the sweet and bitter fruit of that is coming to understand that you can't take your work for granted. You can't take your ability to express that which you want to express for granted. And it is very deeply precious. And so when you can, share it. Don't hoard it. Don't, you know, save it for just the fancy people. Figure out ways to get it out there every way you possibly can and connect, you know, and realize this virtuous cycle that comes between making art and being healed by art, and making art and being healed by art, and put that cycle out into the world however you can. For me, it was the book. I got to write a book.
Yeah, I love that. Like making art and healing art and pushing out there. I think Carolina is better at that than me. I'm much more in my studio for hours a day, and I'm gonna remember that and try. I mean, for me, this is getting out there, a little bit getting out there, you know, to whoever was listening. I hope people were listening. But
you're getting some nice comments. We're getting some nice comments of appreciation in our chat box. I am being mindful of time, and I do see that it's 7:40, and I thank you all so much. We all have stories that belong to us, to our families, and our lives. And I ask the audience out there, how are we collecting, preserving, and celebrating those stories? And as Sarah said, how are we sharing those? How do we relate to our ancestors, our land, our past, our futures? And how, very importantly, how are we healing ourselves and caring for others? And into our audience out there, in what medium do you want to use to record and share your stories? So I thank our three speakers tonight, and I'd like to turn the final program back to Betty McGinnis. And thank you, Betty, so much for inviting me and our panelists here. I know I speak for all of us when I say we feel privileged to be part of your team.
Thank you, Bea, for being such a thoughtful moderator and for bringing us together and gluing us together with this culture into the future and all the possibilities of the arts. And to our very special panelists, it's an honor to have you here. Each one of you have touched the world in many great ways. And the arts, you speak for the artist, and you speak in such a beautiful way. The art is for all, and is such a healing, and we've learned that over these times. We've learned the value of art outside of our own medium, outside of the concert hall, as Sarah said. The arts belong to us. The World Artist Experiences has used the arts as an international language to develop dialogue. And many of you and all of you have done that in your own way. So thank you for bringing your stories to us this evening. And to Patrick McAllister, thank you for being the technical master.
Thank you. You saved me.
And for the beautiful Symposium, a team that worked on this over the months, Bea Fuller, Greg Fowler, Kate Collins, Anna Marie Economou, and Mukwe Siyalwe. And to you, the wonderful audience, for asking the questions, for listening. And now go and tell your stories. We hope that you will come and join us for future World Artist Experiences, both virtual and live. And dear friends, we invite you and even challenge you to take the time to listen to others, to share your story, to share your arts, to bring the arts into your homes and your lives and your neighbors' homes and lives, to use the arts as a means of bridging people and cultures, as well as improving our health and well-being in everyday life, to speak for the voiceless. And together, as we listen and share stories, let us all work toward peace in this tumultuous world we're now living. We wish you a happy Thanksgiving with many blessings and many stories. Thank you for being with us, and good night.